You're looking at me. Hi, everyone.
I'm Andrea.
I'm John.
And we're Voices in the Dark, where we're learning how to human.
We are, gradually. I've got my sexy voice on today because I seem to be a bit ill, so I hope I sound good because I don't feel it. But the codeine should be kicking in.
Fantastic.
So if I seem a bit more chilled than usual, you know it's working. And if not, I need more.
I just hope I'm in frame. I can never check if I'm actually sitting in frame or not.
People can go check out on voicesinthedark.world and watch the video or on our YouTube channel.
Partially out of the frame, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's because you're so hench.
Yeah, I'm so too huge for the
too big for a
angle.
screen. It is time for the next installment of the Modern Stoic series, and this one is riffing off letter number 39 from Seneca, which is entitled, in the published version, On Noble Aspirations. And I didn't really write a little summary of what I think this one is about. I think my best stab at it would be about learning and indulging in pleasures and the virtues of moderation. But I don't really follow Seneca all the way here, because I think when he starts talking about when things get out of moderation in terms of vices and bad habits, I don't think that it doesn't fit with what my sense of addiction is about. And I think he's kind of talking about addiction, even if he's not using that language exactly.
I don't think they had that language at that time.
But I suppose they would have had a way of describing like someone being dependent or... So I think he's talking about behavior in this that looks like addiction, where habits get out of moderation, but it's only really in the past. My understanding of addiction that seems to make more sense to me is really what's only been emerging in the past couple of decades. So can't blame Seneca too much for that.
Yeah.
A weak will.
We will. We'll criticize the shit out of him.
Yeah.
I wonder what he'd think of us if he met us.
Very little. I don't know. He'd be like, why aren't you in frame?
That was letter 1. Did you not get that one?
Always be in frame when making a YouTube video, Letters of Seneca.
We need an assistant. We need or an intern of some kind.
I think to appease both of our needs, it would need to be a ladyboy.
Done.
We know what assistants are all about.
Covers both bases.
Thank you, everyone, for being in touch. We set up a Facebook group now, so rather than just a Facebook page, whereas like you post stuff, and so we post stuff on that. In the group, it's much more a discussion and chat situation. So if you go to facebook.com/vinthed, you'll see the link to the group. And we are shortly today going to be filming and making some Ask Andrea type situation questions and so on. So people have been putting forward questions, much as we appreciate you writing in and asking things. We've made whole episodes on the basis of that, and now we're going to make sort of mini like sub-series Ask Andrea. So people have asked like thoughtful, nice questions, and you're going to tell them why the human race is awful.
Yeah, I mean, belligerently. I got so excited by the vitriol that it brought up in me. I was like, oh, emotions, I remember these.
So maybe this is going to be like our breakthrough of just massive...
Maybe. I'll be curious to see how people respond. Oh, it won't be all...
Oh, did I say misogyny? I think I said misogyny. I meant misanthropy. You're not women hating. It's just
everyone.
Everyone.
I didn't catch that. No, yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I mean, maybe
general hatred for everything and everyone.
Yeah, it's less discerning. So those will be coming out.
I'm not hating on anyone. I'm just disappointed.
You're just disappointed. Yeah, we all need to do better, and that's why we need to stoic harder. I'm really happy with the way that our sex and relationship series has been going.
Yeah, I think they're probably the episodes that have received the most direct, engaged feedback. People have something to say about our reproductive habits.
And non-reproductive.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to go make more of those. We were anyway, but now I think more energized to do so. So upcoming, feel free to suggest ideas. Hit us up on the socials in the usual way and look at the show notes. I think show notes should appear on your podcasting app as well. So you just, swipe and click if you want to get in touch. But I think we're definitely going to have one on camming, as in doing like sexy cam shows in your home or wherever you have your laptop.
To get that paper.
And shock and awe, I've been doing it. So we're going to have some like first-hand accounts.
You got some mixed feelings about it all.
Yeah, it's a complex thing. It's hard not to bring self-worth into the situation. But before we get too sidetracked by that, just wanted to give you guys a little preview as to the sort of things we're going to be doing. What else do we need to say? Big up the Patreon supporters.
Yeah, always supporting us.
But we have no new Patreon supporters for quite some time. Like,
So it's...
I wanted to be able to say, like, you know, here's the latest Patreon supporter, thank you so much, or like shout out the new Patreon supporter this week, month, whatever. But it could be you for as little as $1 a month. Go to patreon.com/vinthed, and you can help us keep the lights on and be able to continue this podcast as our lives disintegrate.
Slowly disintegrate.
Well, like the studio's now...
You're having a malfunction. Continue talking whilst I fix this.
Okay, we're having a wardrobe malfunction, which will be visible on the video, which you should definitely then come and see. Everything's held together with sticky tape, but I think maybe we need something a bit more...
We need clamps. But we need so many different things.
He says we need clamps, if you can't hear that. So, this is an anarchic beginning to this letter from Seneca, but I'm going to push on into it. So Lucilius seems to have written to Seneca basically asking for like crib notes, a little like summaries or the cheat sheet for key bits of philosophical knowledge. And Seneca's not so sure this is a great idea, which doesn't come as a surprise. We're familiar with his views. He says the former, and in this case he's referring to like going and actually just reading the philosophical text, the original material, whatever it is, whether it's philosophy or like where you go and do the actual learning rather than just getting the cheat sheet. He says that is more necessary to one who is learning a subject, the latter, the cheat sheet, to one who knows it. For the one teaches, the other stirs the memory. And I think it's a really good point, because the original stuff is more important for someone who's needing to learn it in the first case. But the crib notes, the cheat sheets, are really useful when you do know a thing, but it's not really at the top of your mind. So cramming is not always a bad idea, but I think it gets a bit of a bad rap, the idea you cram for exams and you forget it the next day.
That's the thing. I mean, it's funny to see that it was a problem even back then when they didn't have school exams, because I think it's a very, very common problem in modern psychology. Like people want the quick answer. They want the 10 secrets to how to improve your business, or, you know, success secrets and things like that, thinking that they will make them successful because they've been trained by school that knowing what the headline is gets you a passing mark. You know, like you have to get to much later in school, or even university, some cases, post-grad and stuff, where a genuine original opinion and being able to make a proper assessment of what you learned is valued.
Yeah, it's valued, because otherwise it's not. They're like, too much creativity here, you know, you're not fulfilling the hoops. And it's not really the teacher's fault, though. I think if you're a good teacher, you do try and nurture that in your students, whilst telling them, I'm really sorry, but the curriculum that you're required to get through, to get the grades, to get your certificate and so on, requires you to basically force yourself through these cookie cutter type shapes. You have to make yourself into the weird shape to go through this hole, which sounds more dirty than I anticipated. But I've definitely found that like playing with the whole crib sheet thing is really good if I've got a bit of a handle on stuff. But to me, in my mind, when I've got like a subject, it's sort of, I've learned a bunch of stuff and it's sort of sprawling. It's this sort of like, I don't know, ocean of bits and pieces floating around, that by being able to just try and get the bullet points or the mnemonics, I have some sense of at least where the pieces are. It's like having an index or like a table of contents as to where I need to go in my head to see that stuff.
Okay.
So I find that useful. I seem to have a weird kind of like visual element to it too. I like to put my notes in different colors. Might be a gay thing.
You reckon?
It might be a gay thing. Everything's pink, that's it. When I say different colors, I just mean pink, all the way through. Maybe
all
brown.
the shades of pink.
All the shades. 50 Shades of pink. Why hasn't that been done? Maybe it has been. Ooh. a new Sex and Relationships episode, 50.
Maybe that's
50
the
Shades
title of the
Pink.
series.
And you go 50 shades darker, and it just gets more and more red because more and more injury is
just rubbed raw. All the chafing.
Yeah, but Seneca's point, I think, is you need to know what the fuck you're talking about in the first place rather than just parroting out the little sound bites.
You do. You have to think of like quick summaries of things as, you know, the if anyone knows how computer search works these days. I don't know if you guys remember back in like Windows 95 when you did a search, you'd have to sit there for like 8 hours before it found the files. You know, you put, okay, well, where's my, you know, sexy vixens, you know, foot 59, enter, and then you like watch it just kind of look through
like a little dog with a magnifying glass?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But these days, you know, you bring up the little search thing and you type, and as you type, things get thrown up. Now that's because they've changed how search works, and there's a little index file which is essentially a glossary or like you know, like the index in a book of every file that there is in every term or every bit of text, so the computer can just scan quickly through that and then refer to basically like a librarian. Go, okay, well, this is in this section, I'll go find it. And I think that's how you should treat summaries, success secrets, or whatever, 10 tips for your business. All those types of things should be just kind of little headlines to get you back to the lesson that you must have learned separately.
And it was making me think this point also of one of Seth Godin's emails that I read the other day, where it's not that he's emailing me personally, but, you know, it's his mailing list.
I've gotten personal email from him.
That's nice. He answers a lot. And that was about how we all seem to want, maybe it's more these days, I don't know, sounds like Lucilius was also trying for it. We all want to have like the clear solution or like the clear rule or the top 10 list of what's good. He said, well, the reality is that the answer is always, it depends. And that doesn't satisfy us very much, but it's true. Like the top 10 like music tracks ever, well, it depends, because if you don't like rock music at all, you're not going to feel that that's an accurate top 10 if it's full of rock music.
Right. This goes back to one of the questions we got asked, which is about truth and the existence of truth. And there is no truth. Truth is relative. That's what that's what that means. So you must define the parameters of the algorithm you're trying to do, such as, okay, what is the best song in the world? That could be
best song in the world.
That could either be, what is the best song to me? What is the most popular song at the moment? What is the song that is generated the most revenue across time, adjusted for inflation? You have to define the parameters of what you're trying to ask.
And so crib sheets, useful, but again, need to understand the parameters as well as like the knowledge. Like, well, what's the best rule to employ at this time? Well, need to take into account all of the circumstances that you're in. So, in any case, Seneca says, go back and look at some of the original stuff. He said, okay, we can do both here, but I want you to go and read some original stuff. And I think he takes an interesting angle on how to think about the work that other people have done in whatever field. He says, pick up the list of the philosophers. That very act will compel you to wake up when you see how many men have been working for your benefit. And I thought, I like that, to think of all the work that's been done by other people as ultimately for your benefit, or at least it's to your benefit. It's been worked out for you. So it could be like formulas for how to science things. That's how deep my knowledge goes. Or the fact that, like, we're sitting here, we got laptops. That means we can just press keys and save files without having to know the code or go and design a microchip to be able to do it. And it's the same with a lot of knowledge, that people have done a lot of the thinking already, which allows us to not have to go and do the full work. Like, instead of, you can go to the library and get the book, you don't need to build the library in the first place and write all the books.
The megalomaniac in me does like the aspect of thinking they did it specifically for me, not just in general for humanity.
It's just for you. Yeah. Every book ever written is inscribed to you, including 50 Shades of Pink. I think this also helps with what I think is quite a common attitude of thinking about how there's been so many great achievements and great thinkers before, like, but they've done it all and they've done more than I ever could, so why even bother? Well, no, that you could think of them instead, all these achievements and things, as a nice kind of leg up situation. So either we're back to perhaps the shoulders of giants, except as I've explained before,
the pyramid of dwarves.
It's a pyramid of dwarves, everyone, their little contributions stacked on top of the other. But if we wanted to look back, and take the long view, you could say, well, there is a giant mass of stuff that we can now stand on, which is helpful. Although if it's a giant, which part of the giant do you need? You just go down to like the groin area to discover what you need to about that
Maybe
part.
the giant is having a sleep and you're standing on its upright erection, looking over the horizon. Like a Eiffel Tower type situation.
Yeah, the only place you can avoid seeing the giant's dick is by standing on it. Oh no, that sounds like a horrendous sort of Me Too abuse situation where like, oh, you don't like seeing my penis? Well, there's only one way to hide it.
Oh dear.
Is that what Louis C.K. was doing?
No, he was genuinely thinking that they wanted to see him masturbate.
You think he genuinely thought they wanted it?
Yeah, because he asked politely, and they were too like, what the hell's going on? I don't know what I should do about this. Plus intimidated by the fact that he was senior to them in the industry to say, this is fucking weird to me. And so they were like, sure.
I think I want to maybe do a whole episode of a sex and relationships type about consent, given I've had a couple of recent experiences, but one in particular where I wasn't exactly giving consent, but I also wasn't saying no, and it's kind of murky.
Consent's not given, it's taken.
That's what happened. That's what happened. So that's like, even though it was I'm not going to go into the details now, but a fairly like tame and innocuous situation and not threatening or violent in the least, still prompted quite a lot of emotional confusion over what had taken place and how whether I was judging myself to be complicit in something or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, little segue sidetrack there. Seneca gets a bit excited at this point in the letter about the idea, about the sort of motivating force in humans, which he says we have to be excited and uplifted to pursue great things. So he says, no man of exalted gifts is pleased with that which is low and mean. The vision of great achievement summons him and uplifts him. Just as the flame springs straight into the air and cannot be cabined, I guess sort of like locked away, or kept down any more than it can repose in quiet, so our soul is always in motion, and the more ardent it is, the greater its motion and activity. So something fundamental I think he's getting at here, that the will to do things that feel significant, the drive to make and achieve and express things. But given what we were saying off mic earlier about like humanity patting ourselves on the back too much, we're going, oh, we've got these great motive forces inside us to do good things. I wondered if you really dug this.
Yeah, no, that part, I always kind of have an exasperated sigh when people talk about purpose and drive and significance, because there isn't any. You only give it to yourself. And to get too enamored by the concept of it, to not realize that it's merely an internal thing, it just fetishizes it to a point that I just think, like, you know, two fingers down the back of the throat. Because ultimately, you know, we were just as happy just dancing and fucking under the stars and, you know, eating roasted mammoth without going, I'm going to change the world. And you don't need purpose to be happy at all. I mean, I guess you need maybe purpose within the tribe. Like, I don't know. I would feel quite content if someone told me, you don't have to worry about money, and like, well, actually, I don't even need the second one, but the second one would be nice. And you're gonna live forever if you choose. I would just kind of go on holiday all the time. Like, I don't think I would do very much.
Really?
Yeah, probably.
Would you make the podcast?
Yeah, but out of enjoyment. Not be like, if there wasn't even one person listening to it, I would still like do it.
But I think that's the sort of thing that maybe Seneca is alluding to, or that's what I thought he was, the wanting to create something which is enjoyment in itself. Like it's the self-generating thing, that whole like flame itself thing that he's talking about, that the same way like people compelled to create art, say like painting, they kind of just keep doing it because maybe it can get fucked up if they wanted it to be successful, if it doesn't work in their lives anymore from financial and practical reasons. But the will to create, I think, is a powerful like internal force in a lot of people, and that I think is what he's kind of getting at.
Sure. And that is a better way of looking at it, I guess. But then when you have people going, you have to find your why and what you're passionate about. And once you find what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life and all that kind of nonsense. And I'm like, well, look, if you haven't found like, oh, this is what I want to do thing, looking for it intentionally as if, it's a magic thing that you must discover. Otherwise, you're not good in some ways. It's a weird perverse loop, I think.
I think the way to go about that kind of thing is like, instead of willfully going, just, if someone says, hey, you want to come to a life drawing class? You're like, yeah, I'll give it a go. Not because you think you're going to find your purpose, but what if it turned out you really liked it? Or
Sure.
you met someone there and they were like, hey, you want to come to the drinking society? And it turns out drinking is your, is your purpose.
No, like doing experience is great. I think my issue at the moment is that I've fallen into the online social media echo chamber of self-improvement and online marketing. And everyone's trying to tell me, about how great life is once you find what you're meant to be doing.
I think the brilliant part of that marketing strategy for them, not because I like it, but because it's effective, is that it's directly identifying a thing that so many people have, which is like, it's like they come up to you and go, don't you feel like there ought to be more in your life? Don't you feel like you're not really doing what you want to be doing? Because your life, it doesn't feel perfect, does it? It doesn't feel quite right, does it? And there'll be a myriad ways in which people are going to have that sort of feeling of like latent dissatisfaction in some way. And so they go, okay, so you feel it. Well, don't worry, we've got the solution, which is to find your purpose. Like, well, or possibly, for say, take one person who's got that kind of feeling, maybe their diet's a bit off. Maybe everything's kind of fine, but they've actually got like a low level sort of lactose intolerance issue going on, and that's really what's causing the issue from the gut leading out. Or maybe it's just, it would be cool if you hung out with some of your friends a bit more often and so on, or allow yourself to read a novel from time to time. It's not like, oh, you feel a bit bad, so you must be lacking purpose with a capital P in your life.
Yeah. But yeah, like to me, happiness and fulfillment is an attitude, really. There are people that, and funnily enough, not being unable to see that and therefore never being happy no matter what you do drives some people to really great success as they desperately trying to find their purpose. And so they do amazing things for the world without actually ever being happy.
I really want to read that piece that Neil Strauss did, this profile on Elon Musk, and I've heard people talk about it, that Neil does his psychoanalysis stuff, and it kind of comes out that Elon's doing a lot of his underlying drive is because he feels that his father never thought very highly of him. So even Elon Musk, who's at the head of this series of companies which are pushing humanity into the future in amazing ways, for him, I think it's not like he's going to win his dad's love by landing on Mars, really. So does he feel okay? I don't know.
I feel like my psychosis is way healthier than his. So my wanting to go on Mars and colonize it was more, as a child, it was more from the point of view that I didn't think anyone else on Earth was good enough for me. I wanted to create my own society with my own set of rules, my city,
with blackjack and hookers.
Exactly, because I just was completely disappointed by my existence.
I'm just disappointed.
I think that's a better way to look at it, because then you feel good about yourself, and you are still enjoying it all the way through.
I'm disappointed, so I'm going to Mars.
Yeah, that was more or less it.
See you, bye.
I wanted to terraform it, make it a beautiful place, with my laws, with the way that I think city planning should work. Oh, no. I was going to create a language because I didn't think any human language was good enough. That was essentially kind of the reason for me wanting to go.
Would you do interesting city planning? Because I feel like when I'm in planned cities, I don't like it. So say Edinburgh I like a lot because it was like the old town is built on... in and around the trail of an extinct volcano, the tail of, whereas the Newtown bit is the block system. And it's sort of shit, the block system. And in most American cities, the ones that I've been to anyway, I'm just like, this is just so... It's like lacking stimulation, essentially. You're just sort of caught in this grid that's meaningless. It can't have much of its own character because it's almost like, in old cartoons when there's like a running scene and they're just throwing the same 3 bits of scenery along behind you again and again. You just unsee it because it's meaningless. So what, would you have nice, fun city planning?
Well, my system would have been, I really have thought about this. Yeah. Would have been based around finding a geographical location which was optimal in some way, maybe with a river. A lot of cities are on rivers, or maybe by the sea. Planning where the center is, putting what I thought should go into the center.
Your dick.
Planning the edges of it, and then planning the public transportation to get you from the inside to the outside and around. And then letting the city grow within that. So it's more like you created an environment, like a terrarium for things to fill out, or like a little plate of agar for the bacteria to colonize. And it would have been based around implementing vehicle-less, pedestrian-friendly city, going back to a more Roman or medieval-like system. But underneath is where all the super high, fast, sort of maglev, hyperloop type stuff is going on, so that you can get, a big sofa delivered to you without dragging it through a kilometer of street upon the surface. That was pretty much the system, so that you could have modern advantages, but going back to a more villagey, like kid-friendly, people-friendly type of environment, and make it, build a lot of parks, because I like cities like London. I haven't been to New York, but I like Central Park as a concept. It was built around a messier version of the Venus Project, I guess. His is very structured and well-planned. Mine was more like, here are the basic systems, and then let the people figure the rest out.
I think I like your system. It's not as Stalinist as I feared. It could be. Well, it allows room for growth. Whereas, say Central Park, I've only seen it in the winter, so I didn't get the full it's lovely and flowering and so on. But at the same time, I just felt it was still this odd artificial strip. It was almost that feeling for me of when you look at some beautiful thing in a museum, but it's behind glass in a box. Okay, I get to go in the box, but it's still basically in a box, surrounded just by the city. It doesn't feel natural at all to me. It's more like a gesture towards...
It is, because it's only there. Because the rest of New York is very built up. But mine would have been more like, I guess, maybe Rome or London, so that there are boulevards or even Paris, trees, lined streets.
European cities, I was thinking about this the other day, are so much better for that, many of them anyway, that there's just more trees lining all the streets and more space for grass and flowers and so on. It's clearly thought, and amazingly, actually, Moscow is quite good for this. It's got horribly wide, huge, polluted highways, but it also has quite a strong focus on having lots of parks, and people really value them.
Cool. I've never been.
We still got to take you
to Russia.
To Russia. It's only £100 or a visa.
It's getting harder, right? Because they're not particularly friendly at the moment.
Well, I would blame the British as much as the Russians.
No, I mean either side. They're not having particular
no. But you could go as an Italian, and it would be much easier.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think you get a much cheaper visa.
I get the Berlusconi's my friend stamp of.
Yeah, the legacy of that, for services rendered, well remembered, happy days. So, what what does Seneca think about Berlusconi? Oh no, the next bit
he
doesn't
wrote
seem,
specifically.
it doesn't seem to be about Berlusconi. I guess we'll have to see what the next bit of the letter actually is. So we were talking about like doing great things, and Seneca seems to think that's cool, but then he kind of prompts us to think about what does great really mean in terms of to us and our personal development. So I've highlighted this quote. It is the quality of a great... I'll start again. It is the quality of a great soul to scorn great things and to prefer that which is ordinary rather than that which is too great. For the one condition is useful and life-giving, but the other does harm just because it is excessive. Similarly, too rich a soil makes the grain fall flat. Branches break down under too heavy a load. Excessive productiveness does not bring fruit to ripeness. This is the case for the soul also, for it is ruined by uncontrolled prosperity, which is used not only to the detriment of others, but also to the detriment of itself. So, I'm pretty into this, not all of it. It seems to me his sort of an argument is like everything in moderation is one part of it, but I would say especially moderation. That I think trying excess is actually really good to see what it is and to better calibrate your 0 point, I guess. Find out what the absolute excess gluttony is like so you have a sense of the spectrum that you're working on. Try abstinence, try a bit of excess. But what Seneca's kind of warning against is that, say, if we were talking about food, if you're eating overly rich food for every single meal, you're going to get sick and unhealthy.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I always get confused when I see people overindulge because I just can't seem to bring myself to ever do that. No. And it's not because I have to stop myself, but it's because, like, I don't know, like physiology stops me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't overeat every meal 3 days in a row. I'll suddenly I'll forget to eat for like a whole day. I'm wondering, and sometimes I wonder if it's because I had a perfectly loving childhood without it. There's no hole I'm trying to fill. So like even things that are really enjoyable, like, you know, tasty food that is bad for you, or, you know, sex or drugs, like for me have a, like, I'm full, I'm good. Mm-hmm. See you guys later sort of threshold. Whereas some people just seem to never be able to get enough. And like, I struggle to relate to that.
I definitely have the cereal situation of like, yeah, I'm just going to eat some more food. I'm like, oh, I feel sick. I'll remember not to do this again. Next meal, nom, 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 nom. So I get it, but maybe you're just more of, maybe there's a biological component, but maybe there's also just, you're able to look ahead to the outcome, realize that it's not something you want, and decide not to go there. But it can be a struggle for a lot of people in different ways.
I get a very clear feeling of when it's very similar actually to being full of like food. When you're like, oh, no, I've had enough. About the other things, about anything. The thing that I come closest to overindulging in, at least as a kid, was video games. Like I could spend the entire weekend playing one video game.
I like the intentional binge. I like that when it's not that I'm being simply controlled. You know, like there's a driving factor coming from I'm sad, so I'm overeating or whatever, but a decision that I'm going to have like a feast of some kind. I mean, traditional throughout human history, like now we're going to just have an excessive day. So like, okay, I'm going to spend the next like 3 days just playing World of Warcraft. So I have in the past. Basically, you know, remember to eat and shit and drink, but that's it. Or like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch this big sporting event, and I'm going to get a stuffed crust Domino's pizza, and I'm going to drink beer, and it's just, you know, but it's a decision at that point. I'm not being controlled by the need for that. It's like, okay.
But I think, what Seneca's getting at least, is that you have to be careful or you might just keep doing it, you know?
Yeah. I understand why you're doing it, I think. I like, we get back in a second to about going too far and what that means. But I thought something... He also emphasizes here the importance of being able to enjoy the ordinary things. And I really like that because I find it pretty liberating that if you just got so used to the 5-star hotel experience that you were actually unable to enjoy the difference of going camping for a day, I think you're sort of trapped because you can't. You need to have something that is the expensive ultimate thing, and you can't just enjoy the simple thing. I like the idea of like remembering to go, okay, well, what are the most simple, enjoyable, ordinary things which are so powerful, like spending time with friends or watching a sunset or holding hands with someone or just being able to pause and go, wow, this is a really delicious apple that I'm eating right now. That remembering to go, oh, value these little bits and pieces, that feels very freeing, because if otherwise you can you're like, I can only be happy when I'm having like a 10-course meal, or I'm the center of attention amongst these powerful people, or I can only enjoy a sunset if I'm doing it whilst like on Virgin Galactic and 0G or something. Life's going to be hard.
I like the Apple example because funny enough, it reminded me of something I said to someone, maybe not 20 years ago, but 15 at least. My sister's first boyfriend accused me of killing his faith.
What did you do, dare I ask?
He was a believer, and my family is pretty much atheist. And so we just had conversation about religion. Mm-hmm. And I asked pointed questions that he didn't have an answer to. Until at some point he decided that God didn't exist. And he was annoyed by this. Mm-hmm. And he blamed me. And because now his life didn't have purpose or meaning. Because God didn't exist. And it's like, what's the point, if there's no... I'm like, and one of the things I said, well, look here, eat this. Like, take a bite. Like, and he's like did it, and he's like, what? Like, it's delicious, isn't it? Fresh, isn't it nice? Like, mm-hmm. Isn't it amazing? That is the meaning of life. Like, that is the purpose in and of itself. Like, to experience what's going on.
You gave him an apple, not your dick.
No, not my dick.
Okay, no crunching.
Then he would have found the true meaning of life. You can't have that.
Don't let him. He's not ready.
He's not ready for that.
But yeah, you see what I get it? My brain is so addled. I am trying so hard to be awake and alert. Did I make sense of what I was saying there? Okay, good. Good, #sense. Seneca returns to the whole like going too far situation. So I've highlighted this next bit. It says, utility measures our needs, but by what standard can you check the superfluous? It is for this reason that men sink themselves in pleasures, and they cannot do without them when once they have become accustomed to them. And for this reason they are most wretched, because they have reached such a pass that what was once superfluous to them has become indispensable, and so they are the slaves of their pleasures instead of enjoying them. So that's quite an interesting point, that once your pleasure is no longer really a pleasure, it's like you have been enslaved by the need to do this compulsive thing. Like, once you enjoyed, I don't know, eating the chocolate, now you can't not eat the chocolate, and you're not even really enjoying it anymore. It's just that you need. So this is where the addiction piece comes in that I mentioned earlier.
Funny enough, I feel like I see that with online porn consumption, the widespread availability of it. And I'm a person that thinks that, unlimited access to pornography isn't a thing that's degrading society anyway, or is particularly bad for individuals. But you do see an escalation in porn behavior.
Porn behavior.
Basic. When I first started when I had broadband before anybody else. Actually, I even watched porn when I had dial-up. Anyway, but I had access to the internet before a lot of people, because my father was into the computer industry in many ways. Mm-hmm. And so I had access to online porn when people didn't even realize that was a thing at quite a young age. And so I'm one of the key targets of people's campaigns where they go, children will be ruined by this. But I think it was really, really healthy for me to have an outlet that did not require me interacting with people, because I wasn't very good at it, which would have left me sexually frustrated. But at the beginning, simple pin-up pictures that you might find in, FHM magazine or something like that were plenty enough.
More than enough.
To stimulate, all I had to do was look at the beautiful lady in the eyes in the picture, and
those beautiful
and
eyes.
I could get there. But slowly over time, you need stronger and stronger stuff. When suddenly you go, when was the last time I didn't watch things with dwarfs, donkeys, and including bondage and role play?
It's interesting because on that theme, like Jamie's told me that he very very rarely watches porn. Just it's not his thing. Just uses his imagination, and I was like, it's not many times that I just use my imagination, to be honest. Usually look for some sort of visual or other stimulation, but I guess there's different intention behind that. Maybe you want to relive or fantasize about a very specific thing, but just as I'd like to get off now, so I want to see something hot, it's much more easy to go check out the porn situation. But yeah, slave to excess and not even enjoying it anymore. You just, there's not enough dwarfs, there's not enough donkeys in this scene, and you're just sort of compulsively doing it. I get as most, for those of us who've been teenage boys, we remember the days where you're just how many times can I come in one day? Can I beat the personal record? And that feeling of God knows what number that you're getting up to, and you're just one more, and you're not really sure why you're doing it anymore because it hurts.
Yeah,
it's not fun, but you're just sort of doing it for the sake of doing it.
I also had the time constraint aspect. It had to be consecutive. Couldn't take little breaks. You just took enough of a break to get the next direction. That was my rule. I got to 4. And then I couldn't touch it for it was 4 in the space of half an hour, I think.
That's a lot, man.
That was a lot. And it was very sensitive for 2 weeks.
But I think that perfectly sums up what Seneca is getting at here. Just becoming the slave to the pleasure, except it's actually no longer even pleasure. And this is something I think touches on addiction, but it's not a model, I think, that Seneca's model here doesn't take into any account current kinds of thinking that what is the underlying reason for this behavior? In contrast to what you said about having a nice loving childhood, the people who are compulsively looking at the donkey dwarf porn, is there something that they're trying to escape to or escape from? What is the cause of the behavior that's going on? And I think it's perfectly reasonable that if cool if you want to be into some heavy BDSM stuff, maybe you're partly working out some issues. Maybe there was something in your childhood which is not still traumatizing you, but somehow you feel deeply connected to certain situations and actions, and it's all cool and healthy. But if you're doing something in the way that we just described, where it's no longer even fun, you just feel oddly compelled to do it, like getting yet another hit of heroin, even though it's destroying your life because you're only obsessed with that, then what's behind it? It's not really good enough to just read a bit of Seneca and go, oh yeah, I'm the slave to my pleasures, I get it.
And I never found sense in only liking one particular type of sex so much that you don't do any of the others. People that do this to access the, let's say BDSM, I get confused. It's like saying I will only eat aubergines forever because they're the best thing that exists. There's also cake and steak and there's other things on the menu. I never like anything so much that I do it to the detriment of everything else in that category forever.
I think that's definitely good. And you're not going to go to the excess and drain the fun out of it. What's the last bit that I've got here before my voice totally croaks out? The worst thing, yes, Seneca says, is where you fall in love with your own vices, which is kind of what we're getting at. But here's the last quote. Then it is... I wish I hadn't got this. I copied this using a different computer and so on. It's in this font, which I'm just having trouble reading. Then it is that the height of unhappiness is reached when men are not only attracted but even pleased by shameful things, and when there is no longer any room for a cure, now that those things which were once vices have become habits. So when something's no longer special or a treat, but I thought of cakes. It's not just that you love eating cake. It's just that cake is now the default, and somehow you're in love with the gluttony of it. It's just like, it's the habit that I always have cake before bed, so I have cake before bed because it's a habit, round and round and round.
At some point it switches from I love cake to I hate not eating cake. I think that's the switch. I think that's the point where you can't stand the absence of your habit or vice as opposed to you like doing the thing.
And I'd also made a little note here back to the BDSM world. We should definitely like talk to some people within, because
BDSM.
Well, I'm discovering I'm probably more kinky than I ever thought I was, but I'm not going to claim to have great knowledge of the BDSM world and the psychologies and experiences of the people who are big parts of it. But so to speak generally, compulsively doing kinky stuff, does that, like you were saying, does that stay exciting if it just becomes completely habitual? I'm not sure if that works, that if it does for people who are into that particular kinky thing. Is that maybe because the mainstream society still is like, no, that's not cool, that's taboo? Is the fact that it's sort of, even if it's become a thing you always do, because there's an external judgmental context, it continues making it exciting?
Oh, maybe. That's interesting.
And would it mean, like, say, if like getting pissed on became extremely mainstream for some reason, would the people who previously really loved getting pissed on would be like, it's just not the same anymore, everyone's doing it? It's like a hipster problem, right? Like, well, we love doing this, oh no, everyone's doing it, is ruined.
It is kind of funny that way. I feel like you see, like, for example, what's acceptable on television has become more and more loose compared, like, there used to be 7 words that you couldn't say on television, as you know, George Carlin did a whole routine on, and these days it's not quite like that. Sex, or I remember first noticing like someone referencing anal sex on TV and going, whoa, like that's interesting. Like, you know, that's the thing people don't talk about. And now it's like every other joke a comedian makes, or like, you know, nearly it's every single TV series. If they want to show someone getting like, you know, brutally raped, it's always like implied that it was an ass fucking. Like it's become more ubiquitous, and suddenly it's like, me, you know, like, that's interesting.
It's funny that we talk about these sorts of things as like desensitizing and putting that negative connotation on it, and I'm sure a lot of the time that is the case, in the same way that Seneca's talking about, if you're going to desensitize yourself, it's no longer even going to be fun. And yet I think desensitizing can be used in this overly morally judgmental way, like, oh, now you hear these swear words all the time, so we're desensitized. Like, I don't think so. I think it's the words themselves never had the power. It depends what you do with them. So the fact that you can say fuck on TV doesn't mean we're desensitized to the way that word might be used to describe specific things or specific ideas.
And at the same time, whilst I really enjoy watching Game of Thrones, Westworld, or Gladiator, if you go back, you know, like in spurts of blood and things, I don't think if I saw someone getting decapitated for real in front of me, I'd be like, yeah, seen that on the last episode. I would still terrifyingly scream and run.
In RL, it's a bit more disturbing. Yes. I was thinking about Hitchcock films the other day, and just how much more effective so many of his techniques were, that to be like freaked out by the birds, or the drama and claustrophobia of the shower scene in Psycho. We didn't need to see like the blade going in and all bits of gore flying everywhere and bits of bone lying around. That, I'm not saying from a moral perspective we just don't need to see that stuff. I think just from like a practical impact perspective, we don't actually need to see that stuff.
We're far more terrified by suspense, by the implication, than the actual thing, always.
And our imagination is going to fill in the gaps. Like in the Psycho shower scene, you could watch it through and you think you've seen her being stabbed, but if you look at each frame, you have not. You've seen a knife, You've seen her reaction. You've seen a movement. You've seen what's meant to be blood. I think it's like some sort of sauce. It's black and white, so you don't know. You don't see the knife go into her, but you think you have because your mind fills it in for you.
I haven't actually watched that movie. Does she not die in the shower?
She does die in the shower.
Oh, okay.
I'm
but
just
you
saying,
just don't see all of it.
Well, you don't. They don't take the time to film a knife penetrating a body.
Yeah.
It's implied, but you don't even, when you watch it, I mean, now that I've told you, you'll probably be aware of it, but you could watch it through and be like, oh my God, he stabbed her in the shower and we saw it all. And you go back and realize, no, you didn't see it all.
That's interesting. Yeah, and older movies tend to have that out of practical reasons, and funnily enough, it elevated them to, like, you know, epic, need to be conserved by the Library of Congress, whatever type status, which they wouldn't have done if they had enough money to do the thing better, because it would have been boring. Like Alien is an example of that. They couldn't make the creature look that great if it was filmed clearly. So it had to be in the shadows all the time. There had to be more the implication of it. And it's still one of the most terrifying and, you know, like cool and interesting movies ever made.
Unlike the second Alien film where there's just like hordes of the aliens running at you and you're like, I don't really care anymore.
I enjoyed Aliens for different reasons, but it certainly wasn't. It was no longer a horror movie, Aliens. It was an action movie, which was fun and cool, but it changed tone completely.
I think suspense is just much more terrifying. Whereas, like, when I tried to watch the recent series of American Horror Story, the suspense stuff was really cool, but like the totally unnecessary levels of gore just really turned me off. And not because I'm like, you shouldn't be showing that. It's more like, I feel sick. I'm not enjoying this. I just feel like you just, like, say that this character's been killed after a big build-up. I'm like, oh no, the character's dead. You don't need to spend 10 minutes, like, disemboweling them and going, look at the entrails, they're so dead. Oh, they're in so much pain. Oh, it's like, not watching it for the guts. It was for the story. So get your shit together, American Horror Story. In fact, don't even bother, because I'm going to check.
Filmmakers need to go back to the basics. Like, seriously, you know, go back and watch the greats. They knew how to fucking put a story together. I mean, for example, watching the latest Marvel movies, whilst the first ones were kind of enjoyable, they're already over-actioned. And by now, it's like there's almost no story at all. It's like every 90% of it is a fight sequence or a chase sequence. And I'm getting so bored. Like, there's only so many ways someone can throw a punch or a car can swerve. It's more about, you know, the human interaction, the mystery or the intrigue, or like that's what keeps us, you know. And especially if it's filmed in a way that you don't know but you want to know, as opposed to people like doing exposition monologues. And I think it's going away. And I don't know if it's like, you know, I think the audience would appreciate it. I don't think it's that, you know, millennials will never watch this if you don't tell them exactly what's happening.
Well, I mean,
we are millennials. What's the next one?
The one after. Is there one after?
Yeah, Gen Z maybe or something. I don't know. It's no longer the millennials are the orphaned.
We're passé.
Yeah, I think. And I think we classify now because they've expanded it to include... Well, Jesus. You classified anyway, but it's now been expanded to include 83, so I'm now a millennial, whereas before I was something else.
Well, when we spoke to Kirsty Blanton, she said that she was, like, technically a millennial. I think she's about the same age as us, but, like, on the older spectrum.
I feel that kids that were born before technology, but that finished their adolescence when technology was starting to become ubiquitous, are their own special group. Because they sort of straddle two sides of two different generations.
I think someone created a really ugly term for it, like zillennial. But I think that is us in the sense that we remember not having it and then having it.
Yeah.
Like internet access in your hand and smartphones and so on. And that does make a difference in your perception of what these things are and how they fit into life rather than being just part of the fabric of life. Anyway. End. So, moderation, good if you want to be able to enjoy things. Excess sometimes.
Yeah.
Go deep sometimes, but not all the time. Sometimes the tip is just enough.
just reminds me of that episode of BoJack Horseman. You haven't seen this one, where I forget her name. The kid star that he used to do the show with, and that now is a 30-year-old like druggy has been starlet, tells him that she's been sober for over a year, and he's like, oh, that's good. But before he can finish saying, well done, he's like, yeah, because I heard, if you don't do drugs for a really long time, the next time you do them, it's super good.
But that's also true. Yeah, be it drugs or whatever, that having a little break
makes a difference.
Does make a difference. That's why I'm going to enjoy the vape that I'm going to have once we complete this episode, because I haven't had one for an hour.
Post-podcast vape.
It's good. I can't have more codeine, though. Not yet. Okay. Oh, if people are listening who are into BDSM in various ways and would like to comment or make suggestions or ask questions in relation to the things that we've been talking about, do please get in touch. I genuinely like to learn more. I've heard some interesting interviews on Chris Ryan's podcast with dominatrices, if that's the right way of saying it, which is very, very fascinating, often extremely insightful, thoughtful people. And they talked a lot about, in a recent one I saw with, what's her name, Alexandra Snow. She makes sci-fi themed porn with drone shots, and she was absolutely fascinating. And they talked a lot about the psychology of what's going on in a lot of BDSM scenes, or if she's there with a client. Just sometimes it genuinely is like therapy for someone. But the core of a lot of it, at least for men as the clients, she said, is getting them to allow themselves to let go, or allow themselves to take pleasure in the stuff that they want to do. It's like being able to stop judging themselves to enjoy it, rather than doing the thing because they're like, oh, I'm such a bad person, that's why this has to happen, as some people can mischaracterize it. I'm sure that's true in some cases, but in others it's more like, yeah, you really want to be flogged on this rack and you love it. Now allow yourself to enjoy it.
Cool. Yet, I kind of wish that less people brought their psychological issues to the bedroom.
Well, at least when you're paying a dominatrix, it's all a nice, clear service,
very well defined service
situation, rather than no, it has to be this way, but I can't tell you why. Or we don't
even know why, probably half the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be daddy, but.
And I'm gonna try desperately to find this one meme. Someone tweeted out about how the shaming of people that like vanilla sex needs to stop, because and he said something I have to find the original because it was really funny, but it was essentially he said something like, I feel sorry for you all that need to be choked whilst on a treadmill whilst
surrounded by dwarves and donkeys just to be able to get off. Stop shaming vanilla sex, everybody.
It was something like that. It was really good. I'll try to find it for the notes.
Okay, I look forward to adding those in the notes. So there we go, everybody. That was the latest Modern Stoic. And until next time...
Please be silly, be kind, and be weird.